Good afternoon. This is an incredible time. We are almost at the holiday of Passover, Pesach. And Pesach, we are going to be forced to spend the holiday at home alone. And we recount all of the events that took place on the first Pesach. And we recount also that there were 10 plagues that were brought in Egypt by God to punish the Egyptians. Why was God punishing the Egyptians? They were only doing what was natural for a conqueror, for a great nation. And the answer is that the people of Israel never fought with the Egyptians. Great empires fought with each other, and when you fought, you won. And to the victor belongs the spoils. And those people who were captured, who were defeated, were killed. The women were taken, and sometimes the children survived, sometimes they didn't. It was only later that the great empires decided that they could leave the people alive, but they would make them into slaves. Because this was economically better off. If you had 5 nations under you serving you, that means you had much less work to do because you taxed the other people, and your people lived in relative luxury. So this was, from an economic perspective, better than killing your enemy, because in killing your enemy, you had to occupy their territory. But if you had a big territory, they had a big territory, there wasn't enough space, enough people to fill those territories. And the territories would get lost and would not be as productive. So it was better to keep the people there and have them give you tribute. But that was only if you fought with those people. The children of Israel were faithful to the Egyptians. They had only brought blessings to the Egyptians. Joseph saved Egypt from its greatest calamity and made Egypt into a mighty and wealthy empire. And instead of showing appreciation, they did the opposite. They showed that they were jealous and petty, and that they had no place for anyone who was different from them. And these character flaws eventually undermined the entire Egyptian character, and they became a second-rate empire. But at the time, their brand was in ecstasy. Their brand was growing. And they decided to enslave the children of Israel, something that was repugnant, morally repugnant. But who's supposed to tell them what they can do? They were on top of the world. Their star was rising. And the answer is God. Ultimately, all great empires ceased because they utilized viciousness, terror, murder, all kinds of devices to humiliate other nations, where it was really uncalled for. And especially in the case of the children of Israel, it was wrong. The Israelites were loyal. They had given back many times more than they received. So why did they enslave them? Only because of jealousy. Over the centuries, the Jewish people who lived in Europe gave to Europe and to the Middle Eastern lands much more than they received. The proof of the pudding is when you compare the populations of the world to Nobel Prize winners. 1/5 or 1/4 of the Nobel Prize winners are Jewish. And we represent only 1/5 of 1% of the nations of the world. That means We are overrepresented in terms of winning Nobel Prizes by 125 times. We are 125 times more productive than our numbers. So we give the world tremendous blessings. What do we get back from the world? We're called the Jewish plot, the protocols of the elders of Zion, that we want to take over the world and hurt the world. We are hated by the Muslims because we took back our land, which is the land of Israel, which is the land that the Jews lived on and the children of Israel lived. Historically, no Arab country lived there. The Arabs do not have a claim to the so-called Palestinians, the Philistines. The Philistines were Aryans. They came from Greece. The people who live there now in Gaza are Middle Eastern. They're Arabs. They're also Phoenicians. They're cousins of ours in terms of their DNA, but they're not Aryans. They're not from the Greek islands. So they're not the Philistines that were there before. So why do they hate us? They hate us because of jealousy. Because they can't stand that we're older than them, more authentic and more successful than them. And so therefore they have to besmirch us and destroy our reputations and in some instances kill us. This is unfortunately what has gone on until today. But there is a new page that is beginning. And this is not because of Zionism, but rather this is part of the prophecy of the Old Testament, prophecy of the Bible, prophecies of the Tanakh, prophecies that come from Isaiah and Malachi and Zechariah, and Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, that all of the prophets prophesies that there will come a king from the house of Jesse, the house of Yishai, from the house of King David. And he will not judge based upon his sight. He will see the truth of things. He will not be impressed by outward impressions. And he will judge all of mankind fairly. And the kingdom of God will be established in this world. It will be a fair and good world with good things for everyone. And what will people be engaged in? They will be engaged only in the pursuit of wisdom. That's what's going to happen. Guess what is happening today? Nobody can do anything. So what are people doing when they're at home? Well, you got to read a good book. How many novels can you read? You begin to read wisdom. Some people begin to read the Torah. Some people start learning the halacha. Some people learn the Kabbalah. But the pursuit of people now is to focus on things that are meaningful. This is a precursor of the coming of Mashiach. Another thing you have to look at is that this is coming around the time of Pesach. On Pesach, we Jews get rid of the chametz. Chametz means leavened, not leavened bread, but anything that's leavened. Leavening, L-E-A-V-E-N-I-N-G, leavening, is sourdough. The sourdough affects the grain and can cause an entire dough to rise in large amounts, much greater than its original volume. And the souring of the leavening actually can sour an entire huge amount of flour. Just a little bit of sourdough, a little bit of the leavening agent goes ahead and changes and transforms an entire huge batch of dough. And this leavening is on Passover prohibited afilu b'mashu. The tiniest amount of leavening is prohibited on Passover. We get rid of the tiniest amount. Why? Because even the tiniest amount of leavening can spoil an entire huge amount of dough. And that dough can spoil other doughs with the leavening. And that sounds just like the coronavirus. It's tiny. A virus is tiny. It can infect a person, an entire person, with a tiny amount. And that person becomes a carrier, and that person can go ahead and infect so many other people and cause them sickness and, God forbid, worse. And this is the same idea as the leavening. The tiniest amount of the leavening has to be prevented. And so we prevent any kind of interaction that where we can interact and get this coronavirus. So you see the connection between the coronavirus and the holiday of Passover very profoundly. And then there's the story of the plagues. The plagues, 10 plagues Moses brings upon the Egyptians, and the Egyptians don't take a lesson. Well, most of the Egyptians do, but Paro doesn't take a lesson. And he won't change his mind until his son is dead. Where can you find such obstinance? Such a slap in the face to reality. Where can you see people that are so wrapped in themselves that they don't see the truth? Guess what? You see it with this disease. I have to give honor to Dr. Zelenko for his courage, for his wisdom, for his being an articulate advocate for what's true and what's good. But people deny his findings. The man has treated hundreds of patients. At one point, he's treated probably 1,000 patients. He's seen more than them, but he's treated at least 1,000 patients. Those patients that he's treated, not one has died. Only a few have had to go and be intubated, and they're getting better. And so how does the world react to hundreds of people being cured by this Hasidic doctor? Oh, it's just anecdotal. It's not a real finding. We have to have a scientific test. What are the scientific tests going to be? They're going to be on several hundred or several thousand patients. He already has seen thousands of patients. He has given the protocol to many hundreds of them, but he's seen thousands of patients. From the people that he's seen, he knows that they have. How does he know? He tested them, my friends. Then he ran out of tests. So he ran out of tests. He knows what is coronavirus. His staff has seen hundreds of such cases. This is not anecdotal. This is not 10 or 20 random samples. This is not the personal story of one or two people who have had miracle cures, but the story of an entire village of Kiryat Joel with 35,000 people living in it and not one death from corona of COVID-19. This is incredible, my friends. How can this be? It can only be if it really works. Why is the world not listening? You know why? A, because President Trump thinks this is good. So if Trump thinks it's good, it's got to be bad. Number two, these are the reincarnations of the Egyptians. Wait a second. The Forward, a bunch of Jews, are also saying that you got to wait. This is a whole bunch of baloney. And Snopes, who's probably Jewish, says this is not proven. This is exactly what Paro did. Paro says, where's your control group? So Moshe says, here's my control group. I have the people who live in Goshen, the people who live out of Goshen. The people who live in Goshen won't have any wild animals. People who live out of Goshen will have wild animals all over them. That's what happened. Then the people who live out of Goshen, their animals will die. People who live in Kiryat Yoel, their people will live. Their animals will live. That's clear, pretty clear. No, that's not good enough. What was the argument? They created an argument. Not because there is an argument, but because since it's coming from holiness, since it's coming from truth, since it's coming from God, it can't be true. Science is what rules this world, not God. Pharaoh said, I rule the world, not God. The people in the university say, we rule the world, not these frummies, these religious fanatics, the Zelenkos of the world. Never mind he's a board-certified physician. Never mind that he has as much practice as anybody else in those highfalutin towers. Never mind that he's one of the most brilliant men in his field. Read his biography. The reason that he is opposed, the reason Trump is opposed, is the same reason why Pharaoh refused to believe that God caused all of those plagues. He didn't refuse because it didn't happen. He just wanted that it wasn't so, because he wanted a different outcome, because he wanted to believe in something else. ABC, NBC, CNBC, MSNBC, CNN, the New York Slime and the Los Angeles Slime and the Washington Pest, they don't care about truth. They care only about what they want. They don't want to accept that a religious man who looks a little bit like me should be right and they should be wrong. And because they don't want him to be right, therefore he can't be right. They don't want Trump to be right, therefore he can't be right. Instead of saying, let's look at the facts. Oh, we need tests. How many tests do you need if there's an entire city called Kiryat Joel with not a single fatality from COVID-19? Explain that to me. 35,000 people, not a single death. They've had hundreds of cases of COVID-19, not a single death, just 3 intubations, and they're doing pretty well. This is not an anecdote. It's a fact. Hydrochloroquine, zinc, and zithromycin work. Why does it work? I don't know. But a religious doctor discovered that it works. And a religious man who's a flawed person, but a religious man nonetheless, that was the president, said it works. And they don't want it to work. And you know what happened at the end to Pharaoh? And unfortunately, that's what those people are looking at today. Don't be like them. Don't accept their ideas. Truth is truth.